VikesNow, Dustin Baker. We're going through surprises from Bills Vikings yesterday. What I do each week after each contest is go through the broad takeaways or I guess the all-impactful themes going forward, and that was the show yesterday after the whirlwind victory in Buffalo. So this one's going to go through the game and some of the surprise items that stood out in the 33-30 triumph over the Bills at Highmark Stadium. And tomorrow, we'll talk to Josh Fry for his take about 8-9 minutes on Bills and then 8-9 minutes on Cowboys week. The Cowboys are 6-3, and they're coming in as 1-point favorites over the Vikings, road favorites. I don't get it. Do you? All right, let's go through surprises that came out of Week 10. The first one, I can't remember if I mentioned this yesterday, but I'm going to do it again regardless, is that the offensive line for your Minnesota Vikings held up. Why is that important? Well, it's been doing it for the most part all year. The Commanders game was a little dicey, the pass protection, I should say. And in a game against a Super Bowl caliber contender, it was the front runner per sportsbooks going into the game. The offensive line, specifically the pass protection, needs to hold up because that's been a bane of the Vikings' existence since 2010, since Steve Hutchinson, Bryant McKinnie. Well, Steve Hutchinson retired and Bryant McKinnie went on to the Ravens to win a Super Bowl and Miami for a season. But you'll recall in 2019, after Minnesota upset the Saints in the Superdome, thanks to Kyle Rudolph and Kirk Cousins, they went on the road to the 49ers and got embarrassed because the pass protection was so shitty. In a big game like this, on the road, where the Vikings aren't usually that good against a team with a winning record, the offensive line stood up, and even when Darisaw got hurt, Blake Brandel came in and did somewhat decent. And they're going to need pass protection in the postseason, and that's right, you can start thinking about the postseason, 8-1. They could probably get by against some of these teams the rest of the way with average pass protection. Kirk Cousins is used to being besieged. But when they showed up against the Bills, who was the number one defense per points allowed and has a relatively ferocious pass rush, that's a big deal. In fact, in that specific game alone, 4 of the top 5 performers on offense per Pro Football Focus were offensive linemen. I can't remember the exact order, but I think it was Cleveland, O'Neal, Bradbury, and then Darisaw. And the only guy that didn't make the cut for that individual game per PFF was Ed Ingram, because bless his heart, he's a rookie trying to catch on. But the 4 out of the 5, it was Jefferson and then the good offensive lineman who topped the grading system for the win over the Bills. And that is a gigantic development, because I didn't have this show last year. But if I did, we wouldn't go through and talk about how good the Vikings pass protection was. All we've ever done since Adrian Peterson's MVP season is bemoan the pass protection and not be able to figure the son of a bitch out. But it appears they're getting there, especially if Ingram gets through some of his rookie lumps. The Vikings will need pass protection a lot better than they've had in years past if they want to effectuate this Super Bowl contendership that they suddenly have after, you guessed it, beating Buffalo. The next one is injuries. So for 6 weeks up until the bye week, the Vikings were relatively healthy, only missing Lewis Seen, who broke his leg and we hope will return in September of 2023. But suddenly, if I would have told you, suddenly the injuries are kind of there, and they're not damning, but they're not good. If I would have told you at any time since the NFL schedule released that the Vikings would play the Bills, and throughout portions of the game, they would be without Christian Darisaw. Upstart rookie cornerback Caleb Evans would have a concussion. TJ Hawkinson missed some snaps. There's no Irv Smith. Cameron Dantzler didn't play. Dalvin Tomlinson was out. And Lewis Seen never had a chance to even get in the game. If I would have told you that list of injuries and the Vikings still won at Buffalo 33-30, you would have called me a madman. I might be a madman, but on this one, it's wild. I know Buffalo had a lot of injuries, so perhaps that was a wash. But no Darisaw in I can't remember exactly when he got hurt, but kind of down the stretch. No Caleb Evans. Hawkinson missed a little bit. No Irv Smith. No Cameron Dantzler. No Dalvin Tomlinson. No Lewis Seen. And the Vikings still won. And it didn't feel like those players' reservist supporters truly struggled. Andrew Booth didn't look too good, but, he wasn't a total seismic train wreck. So the fact that there were injuries that reared their head against the Bills, and the Bills, of course, had injuries too. Maybe we can circumvent some of these injuries because I don't know if Irv Smith will be back in the regular season. Dantzler will be back in 3 weeks, hopefully at the soonest, and then Tomlinson's week to week. But suddenly there's a lot of injuries, and for the Vikings to still go on the road and beat the mighty Bills, it's pretty damn noteworthy. Next, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the swings of that game, the pendulum. Oh boy, there were how many times where, you thought it was kaput, but the reason that I bring up the swings, they're self-evident. If you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about, is that typically the Vikings are on the other end of the stick, and you can feel it in your bones what I mean. Whether it's Monday Night Football in 1998 against the Packers, it's the Arizona Cardinals in the final game of 2003 season, it's Blair Walsh's miss, just down the Cardinals last year, week 2. When games are that important and they get that funky, we do it at Soldier Field every year where things get fluky, funky, and weird. It's normally not good for the Vikings. It's usually the other team who comes out on the positive end. Now, I know we had the Minneapolis Miracle, fully aware that we walked off the Saints in 2019, but those are like the examples of when things worked out. I remember when Rudolph caught that pass in the playoffs, somebody tweeted, I don't know if it was anybody important, like, oh, the Vikings are the luckiest team in the world. It's like, you're pointing to like the 1 or 2 examples where things actually worked out. Well, the Bills game was like that. There were so many mighty swings, and I'll talk about this one towards the end a little bit more, but it was odd and unfamiliar for Minnesota to be on the positive, the enthusiastic end of a game that went that wild. The next one is Dalvin Cook. So he almost single-handedly kept Minnesota in the game with his 81-yard touchdown, but they curiously didn't really use him in the second quarter. I know that they like to, just like Zimmer did, they like to intermix Alexander Mattison, which is fine. But when Cook is starting to hit these home runs, started with Miami with that big one, and look what happened. They won that game. It was eerily similar, how much of a thumbprint he was putting on games with massive Adrian Peterson-like touchdowns. But I don't think that there should be lulls of games where even if you want to get Alexander Mattison touches, great, but maybe on third down you get Dalvin back in there or something. I believe Dalvin didn't touch the football in the second quarter, and he's your handsomely paid running back who's showed you that he's still pretty damn productive at age 26. I don't think there should be gaps in the offensive game plan where you go away from Cook. And now that you're starting to look at what the offense is, we're over halfway through the season, it really should just be like this trifecta. All right, you target Jefferson this play, second down, maybe a out in space screen to Dalvin, third down, go to your money man, TJ Hawkinson, and just switch off between those 3. In terms of, all right, first down, you can hand it off to Dalvin, or second down, you can hand it off to Dalvin. But the guys that are coming up big in the clutch are Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, and for 2 weeks, TJ Hawkinson. So, yes, you can get Adam Thielen intermixed in there and then try a home run ball or 2 with KJ Osborne. But I would really just enjoy if this 3-headed monster of Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Cook, just, every other play. Pick one. All right, this is a Hawkinson play. All right, this one is a Jefferson play. That's how good those men are at making plays when the ball is given to them or thrown at them. And it's sad to see Adam Thielen take a footnote in that, rotation. But I think we have to face it that he's not quite as dynamic as he was even last year, or his peak of his powers was 2018. But don't go away from Dalvin Cook anymore. Don't just say, we'll put him on the shelf this quarter. That's stupid. Winding down, the defiance of old Vikings tendencies is something that continues to excite me and surprise me. What do I mean by that? Well, it's kind of a piggyback off of talking about those swings. The only time in 2022 where you sat down, so I'm going to watch the Vikings game, baby. Hopefully they're going to win. The only time it felt like the same shit was week 2 at Philadelphia, under the bright lights. Turned out to be that they're playing one of the best teams in football who have just extraordinary offensive and defensive trenches. But that was the only time where midway through the game, you're like, no, same shit. I can't believe I watch this every single year. They're not equipped for primetime football. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Doesn't matter who the coach is. They come in against a good team and look like imbeciles. That happened certifiably against the Eagles, but that's the only time this year where the vintage Vikings that, oh my God, I can't believe they broke my heart, or here's what's going to happen. They're going to go on the road and lay an egg against Buffalo because they're pretenders. That's the only time you can point to in 2022 where it felt like the old negativity of the Vikings seeping through was at Philadelphia. I recall when we were going down to Miami, I was thinking, God, if Tua Tagovailoa is going to play this game, they probably wouldn't have won. But, it's Skylar Thompson, so I'm going to pick a win. But in that vein, where I have those stereotypes about the Vikings, I think we can shed those. Because time and time again, if only through, 2.5 months worth of football, they're not emulating the bad parts of their old ways. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say here? Of course, there's missed extra points, so they're there to remind you that, we still do this stuff that drives you nuts. But coming out with victories 7 straight times in barn burner games that are like Oscar-worthy thrillers, I think is noteworthy because in the old regime and even before Zimmer, in this stretch, the Vikings are probably going to be about 3-4 at best, maybe 4-3 on a team with a good roster. So I think, tentatively, we'll see what happens when the playoff starts. I think all of the, oh my God, what's going to happen on this play? Or, we're going into this road game, we're going to just get thrashed. I think you can start to let those subside because the culture is different. These guys don't care about Vikings history like we do. I mean, they're there for their paycheck and to win now. They don't care about 1998 and what Gary Anderson did. That's you and that's me. So I think they have short memories that way. And all of the stuff that makes us just nauseated in big moments, I'm starting to think, I don't have to feel that way anymore. And there's no better example than all the wild stuff that happened in Buffalo. Second to last one. I don't know if this necessarily involves the Vikings, but this is Josh Allen. I don't know if you need to cover your ears or if the nationwide NFL media needs to do that same thing, shut their eyes, but Josh Allen lost that game for his team. Nobody besides me will say it out loud. I know some people tweeted it, and that's cool. But 2 interceptions that were pretty ghastly. I guess the first interception, it's 4th down. You might as well throw it if the play was shitty. But the fumble was unforgivable, enabled the Vikings to win. And then the final interception where Patrick Peterson closed out the son of a bitch, you're thinking, I thought this guy is supposed to get the MVP. This isn't MVP worthy. And then you start to peel back the curtain and you realize that the Bills aren't that good in one-score games. You just kind of think they are because they're Bills. It's kind of the same speech that I give about the Pittsburgh Steelers defense last year when the Vikings beat them. The Steelers defense was rotten last year. It was no good. But because from a surface standpoint, you're like, we're playing the Steelers this week. They got a good defense. Nope, they didn't. You just think they do because they always did. And I think that's what we do with the Bills is like, Josh Allen, too much time in the clock left for him, which I get it, but they're not very good. I think my homie in Germany, Yannick Eckhart from Vikings Turd, I think he tweeted that they're 2-9 in their last one-score games, something to that effect. I'll have to pull the tweet again. But that's the deal, is Josh Allen is great. You can't take him down. Can't have one guy bring him to the ground because he's so big. But he wasn't very good. He was good in the middle section of the game, but when it mattered the most, he was the problem. That doesn't suggest that he is overrated or you need to bench him or anything. It's just that I've said for a year and a half on my NFL Trend Zone show and even in some of my Vikings writings that I think that there's Patrick Mahomes right here at number 1, and then right about here is Josh Allen, and then the rest of them, Lamar, Rodgers, the MVP version. But I just think Mahomes is the best quarterback in this league, and Josh Allen is, a definite number 2 when Mahomes is number 1, and it was proven all over again. He didn't close the game out, and he just made curious follies that I don't think that a Mahomes would or, Rodgers in 2021 would have. But still a great quarterback. I'm sure he'll figure it out, and they'll win a Super Bowl or whatever. Not my problem. And then the last one is the sheer number of times that this game should have been over. You cannot forget that. in the haze, the purple haze of the afternoon, you're sitting there thinking like, oh my God, time after time. It was like the Minneapolis Miracle in that regard, where you would forget Kai Forbath's long-ass field goal to tie it or take the lead. I can't even remember now. But there was about 10 standalone events in Vikings-Bills where if that would have happened against the Commanders or that play would have happened against the Cardinals, we would have been like, holy shit, do you remember when KJ Osborne rushed on 4th and 2, extended the game, and then they kicked a field goal and won? But there was like 10 of those moments for both teams that further the case for this being one of the best regular season games in football history, let alone Vikings history. On the Vikings end of it, there was KJ Osborne's 4th and 2 run where he, lunged, and that was, underrated in retrospect. Of course, there was Jefferson's catch, the OBJ catch with the guy draped on him. That was 4th and 18. If you ever want to argue about why that catch was better than any others, it's because of the stakes. That was 4th and 18. I don't remember exactly what OBJ's was, but it wasn't 4th and 18. And then Cousins sneaking it. That's quarterback sneak, I think, has worked 4 or 5 times, and it's new for the Vikings. And then he didn't quite get in, or at least the ref said he didn't. That should have been game over. And then the 12-man on the field. It was confirmed that when Dalvin Cook dropped the 1st and goal pass, there were too many guys. And that was a 3-yard loss. That should have been, a redo and got even closer. So there was about 5 or 10 small things, almost like the butterfly effect, that if that guy didn't make that play, the game's over, and we're talking about the 7-2 Vikings. And that is a large development for a team that's now setting sights on the Super Bowl, that they're able to win when they're left for dead over and over. Tomorrow we'll talk to Josh Fry. He's the editor of PurplePTSD.com. We'll get his final closing arguments about Bills and start to look at the Cowboys. That's all I got for Tuesday, and Skol, baby.